mic check, please.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Ducks Unlimited podcast. I'm your host, Chris Jennings.
I'm your host, Dr. Mike Brazier.
My name is John Gordon. I'll be your host.
And I'm your host, Katie Burke.
Welcome to the Ducks Unlimited podcast, the only podcast about all things waterfowl. From hunting insights to science-based discussions about ducks, geese, and issues affecting waterfowl and wetlands conservation in North America. The DU Podcast, sponsored by Purina Pro Plan, the official performance dog food of Ducks Unlimited. Purina Pro Plan, always advancing.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Ducks Unlimited podcast. I'm your host, Chris Jennings. Joining me today on the show is Rusty Creasy. Now, he is the manager of the Coca Cola Woods in Arkansas. Rusty, welcome to the Ducks Unlimited podcast.
Man, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate you giving me a break from this heat that we got outside, able to come in for a little bit.
Yeah, it has been hot. Now, it hasn't been hot and dry, though. You've gotten some water, though, haven't you?
Oh man! The farmers and people like myself who have crops and stuff in the ground are absolutely tickled right now. It is as good of a start to the growing season and to the farm year as I have ever seen. I mean, in our area especially, nothing really flooded out, but yet nothing else is burning up. We've had just the right amount of rain, and man, we are tickled to death so far.
You better start knocking on wood now if you're talking like that. That's scary.
Absolutely. It's either going to be a drought or a flood in the next couple of weeks, one of the two.
That's right. Well, before we get into more in-depth kind of waterfowl habitat conversations here, I always like to let some new guests on the show just kind of introduce themselves, tell us what you do, where you're located, what you do on a day in, day out basis. So if you want to go ahead and do that, just kind of introduce yourself to our audience.
Absolutely. So we're located in Northeast Arkansas, is the area we're in. I'd say hour and 15 west of Memphis, and about the same northeast of Little Rock, and then an hour south of Jonesboro, right around the McCroy area. And the Coca Cola Woods is just a privately owned club that we've never been a commercial club, never sold hunts per se. It was actually developed the same year, and you'll know this for sure, the same year Ducks Unlimited come out, which was, I think, 1937. Is that correct?
That is correct, 1937. All
right. So that's the same year that the Pigeon family, who at the time owned the Coca Cola bottling company in Memphis, they bought this piece of property. And Mr. Pigeon and the family were big duck hunters. So they just, kind of did some little levies, and this was their little place that they would bring, customers and family and friends. And it's just, that's how it kind of got the name, the Coca Cola Woods. And the Pigeon family owned it till the mid 90s, and a gentleman from Alabama owned it. And he owned it till 2010 when Mr. Dobbs bought it, who was another Memphis guy. And he went right back, named it, went back to calling it the Coca Cola Woods, because as a kid growing up, that's what he always heard it called, and heard all the stories about it. And when the opportunity come up to buy it, man, he jumped on it, and he has not regretted it since. But we pride ourselves on just watching a really, really good duck show. And I mean, I tell people, if you can't have fun at our place, you need a new hobby. I mean, even if you're not a hunter, the sun sets, the sun rises, watching the ducks leave the woods. We've got a great staff we run it like a commercial operation, as far as the way everything works. But we've got a great staff, and I mean, again, whether you're a hunter or not, you're going to have a good time when you're over here with us. And so we take care of Mr. Dobbs and his family and his close friends and business acquaintances. So it's the dynamic has really not changed in almost 90 years or whatever it is. It's still the same, just friends and family and business acquaintances sharing a tree in the woods or sharing a blind.
That's awesome. Now, during the season, you are day to day, you're guiding pretty much. But one reason why I wanted to have you on the show here today was, you post a lot of Instagram videos where you kind of talk about this summer work that you're doing. And we've had, Tony Vandemore on here where he talks about, what he's doing up there in his neck of the woods up in northern Missouri during the summer, where it's like, I think what some duck hunters kind of miss sometimes is that there's a lot of work that goes into some of these private clubs and even some of the public ground as well, which we'll also get into in another podcast. But, the work that you're doing during the summer is what's really making the fall and the hunts, be successful. So, let's kind of touch on that, like kind of a day in the life of what you're doing right now. I mean, it's July. And most people are not thinking about duck hunting, but I know you are. We typically are around here at Ducks Unlimited, and we're kind of stuck in that mode all the time. But I know your mindset is definitely on the ducks, but in a different capacity as far as you're out there working crops and working little areas. So kind of bring us through kind of a day in the life of what you're doing right now in July.
Right. Well, you said it best, with what you do with Ducks Unlimited, you think about a duck every day of the year. And so do I, I just call it the process. It starts all over again. Basically the day season goes out and you're putting gear up, then you drain the water. And then once you get the water drained, if you follow my Instagram, you know how I fight the beavers. Mm-hmm. It's a weekly deal, finally get the water drained. And anything that we can do as hunters or conservationists to improve the experience, but more importantly, improve our habitat, it just pays huge dividends. And kind of what I'm trying to, the mindset I'm trying to get people to think like and to see is that it doesn't just happen like we're talking about. It is a 365-day process of whether you're planning, whether you're planning, whether you're scouting. I mean, it all ties in together. But, we take care of a little over 1,000 acres of property, but the same techniques that I use day to day or throughout the year, and that's what I try to show people through social media is what I'm doing. You can downscale that to just a single duck hole. So, if somebody's listening to this and they've got one duck hole, they've got an acre of ground, or they've got just a little small tract, there are things that you can do to improve that. And like I tell people, if it buys you one extra hunt, all right, well, you go and you take your son or daughter and they kill their first duck, or you take a buddy and they kill their first band. Who's to say that work that you did this summer wasn't attributed, that wasn't attributed to everything you did. Mm-hmm. So now all of a sudden the work that we do in the summer, it's worth it. And that's just the mindset I'm trying to get people to say, or to catch on, is to just anything you can do, make your property the best it can be. We're all dealt a hand, and it's how you play that hand and what you put into it to see what happens at the end. But with all that being said, we start planting rice in the woods the last week of May. I let it warm up good. I used to try to get in there earlier, but with the cooler nights, a lot of times the rice just didn't come out growing like I wanted it to. So I wait till about the last week of May. And, I've got different techniques. I water seed some rice. I do like a farmer would do and disc it and lightly cover it. I have some spots that I mud in. I've got a little old Kubota tractor and a 6-foot disc, and just get in there and mud it and slop it up, and that rice will stick and sprout and come right up. And once you get that rice to sprout and come up, well, now we're off and running. Now you're spraying, you're fertilizing, you are putting water on it where you can, so it's all just a process. And, but it's something that we all can do no matter what size of property we have, or we're managing, or we're leasing, or whatever.
Yeah. Now, do you have, the majority of your habitat is in rice, or do you guys have any other like moist soil or anything else?
Okay, so in the woods, we've got 520 acres of timber that is levied up and flooded. It's all contiguous with one levee around it. Inside that 520 acres, we've got 19 food plots. I plant just rice inside the woods, in those plots. Now, the southeast corner of the property, about a 40-acre little corner there, is willows and buckbrush and lots of smart weeds, lots of natural stuff. And that's something that I think another thing that's a good time to say is diversity is huge. You know, there's places in the woods that I could go in with a bulldozer and open up and make another huge rice food plot.
Mm-hmm.
But those ducks, they like it like it is, you know. And I tell people, if a duck's using something and he's in there year in and year out, day in and day out, don't change it. He's coming there for a reason. You know, when you come in there, all you can do is mess it up. You know, I've heard people, oh, well, this tree needs cut, this tree needs cut, we need to do this. Well, now all of a sudden they change the hole and the whole way the little hole or whatever you want to call it, shooting hole looks. Now it looks like a shooting hole, or it doesn't look natural to them, and it changed what they were coming in there for, and you mess it up. So, you know, it's kind of like a duck coming in with his feet out, and you're on a duck call. About all you can do is mess it up. So the best thing you can do is not to call. And so if you've got ducks using an area and coming in, just leave it alone, because they're coming there for a reason.
Yeah, and it could be, you know, we have that conversation all the time. A lot of times that natural vegetation, those moist soil type, you mentioned smartweed, different types of vegetation like that, seed producing, can be better than just about anything you can plant. So, you know, I think that's one thing for people to keep in mind. Is that pretty much how you kind of treat that buckbrush area? We're just like, man, that's it. It's done.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You got different, and you know, later in the year you get those invertebrates and bugs, and I mean, a mallard duck will eat anything. I've found tree frogs, I've found snails, I've found you name it, man. I've found it all as far as what a duck will eat, and so when they're hungry, they're not picky. But to go back to your question, inside the woods, that's kind of what we do there, and then we've got 100 acres of crop fields that they're just outside the woods, broken into two 50-acre fields. And we try to do, it's usually a bean and rice rotation. One will be beans, one will be rice. And then the bottom of the bean field, I would plant some strips of corn, 8 to 10 acres of corn. Well, this year, my farmer planted the whole field in corn. So I got 50 acres of corn, but now he's going to cut his part out. And so we'll have 50 acres or I'd say 40 acres of cut corn with 10 acres of strips of corn standing. So I'm actually pretty excited about that. This will be the first year that field's ever been in corn. And the other 50-acre field is rice. So what I like to do is the week before season, I'll flood one field or the other. This year, if the corn does well, I'll probably flood my rice field first. And that'll give them fresh food, fresh water. We'll leave 10 acres of standing rice and strips throughout the field. That way they can't just roll in and eat you out of house and home.
Yeah.
And that's kind of our rest area outside the woods. So a lot of evenings, you know, you'll watch the ducks. They'll jump up out of the woods. They'll fly, sit down in your rest field. Well, man, best case scenario there, because you're able to hunt your ducks, but you're also keeping them on your property.
Yeah.
Which is huge, especially when you hunt every day. So that's kind of the way that works. But then last week or so of December, right there around Christmas, we'll keep the other rest field dry. We'll put the boards on and kick the wells on, and we'll flood the other 50-acre field. Now, all of a sudden, you've got another 50 acres of fresh food, fresh water, that kind of feeds the woods and feeds our area the remainder of the season. It's like your first field gets you through the first 30 days of season. Your second field gets you through the last 30. And man, since we've kind of gone on that rotation, it has been huge. We've got an area of the woods that we deem a rest area as well, and don't hunt it until the last week. And that's that area I was speaking of earlier about the buckbrush, the smartweed, and all that stuff. That's we call it the willows. And we don't even drive a boat around it. We don't hunt it. We hunt within maybe 300 yards of where the ducks kind of start in there. But so we are really, we attribute low pressure and rest areas. That's what we think a lot of our success is from. You know, a lot of folks say that, well, they come in the woods to eat. No, they come in there because they know they're not going to get shot. You know, we hunt one group a day. We don't split up into 2 or 3 groups. So, on 520 acres, you're hunting one hole. If you're on the north end, well, now you've got everything south of you that's rest. If we're hunting on the south end, you know, so low pressure is huge, I think. in any hunting area.
Yeah, no, and I think, I was going to ask you about hunting pressure and how you guys manage that, and we've kind of opened that door. But one thing, you mentioned the fresh water, obviously fresh food, but just hunting in Arkansas, the last 10, 15 years for me has really been eye-opening when we do get a good rain and it floods fields that, there's so many fields that are flooded and hunted, obviously. But when you see how those ducks react to just that fresh water. A lot of times that water's been sitting in there since October, November. The water's been in these fields for a long time. And seeing that fresh water hit some of these new habitats, man, those ducks can really respond to it. So having that second 50-acre plot probably really probably draws in more ducks than what are already there.
Absolutely. And yeah, like you're talking about, you catch a 2 or 3 inch rain and somebody's got some boards on, and there's that sheet water out there. I mean, you see it immediately. Those ducks hit that fresh water. And something I've also noticed, the fields that are flooded, let's just say you've got a 250 acre field and let's just say your water line is 300 yards from the woods. Now, all of a sudden, it rains 2 inches. Now the water line's 350 or 400 yards from the woods, push more out into the field. It's like clockwork. Those ducks go out and follow that rise out to the edge of that water because, they know, hey, this hadn't been flooded. Here's fresh food. Yeah, I mean, it's awesome to see. And, we've actually leased a couple fields nearby that are real close to the woods just for rest areas, and don't hunt them. We lease them. It's what's crazy. You lease them with the right not to hunt, just so we can hold more ducks in the area. And a lot of private landowners or managers, I'm sure us and like Tony. Me and Tony talk a good bit, and he's been very handy to have, and he's super sharp and does great. And I've leaned on him some for advice, and he's been good to me. But yeah, we hold ducks, and yeah, we shoot some ducks. But everyone around us benefits from what we do. If you lease a pit nearby, or if there's some public land nearby, we hold them in the area. And yeah, I'm sure it's a pain in the butt at times to watch them go into our rest field or go into the woods and you're sitting there. But I mean, it's kind of one of those deals. Had you rather not have them close, not have them at all? Yeah. So, but a lot of people don't quite see it that way, and that's just the way it is.
Yeah,
so.
Yeah, that's just kind of the way it is. But yeah, no, I mean, it's very similar to like the refuge system. The idea is to get ducks in the area, staying in the area, venturing out on occasion to do different things. When additional habitat does pop up, they will leave those habitats, go there. It just provides more opportunities for everyone, I would imagine.
Absolutely.
Oh, no, I was just going to ask, I was watching a couple of your videos that you had, and you walked into, one of the rice stands and one of your holes, and you had a bunch of weeds, and you were, I think it was yesterday, actually, you had to go in and basically that was going to be one of my questions. How are you managing these crops in the timber? I mean, what additional disadvantages do you have really by having crops in the timber as far as getting equipment in there and some of the just headaches that you deal with?
Oh, yes. So, this is year 19 or 20 that I've actually been planting rice in the woods. And so I'd be lying if I said the first 3 or 4 years that I didn't get stuck a lot. Learn it. I have, but over the years I've learned, all right, you got to stay away from this spot. You got to stay away from this. And I can tell you every sinkhole, every stump that's on the property and all those food plots. So that intel's been huge. But, we've got a mile to get to the woods. And then like where I was spraying those coffee beans yesterday, that was another half a mile down just some muddy four-wheeler trails. So you've got to use small equipment. Like I said, I've got a little old 38 horse Kubota 4-wheel drive tractor and a 6-foot disc. But now the particular hole where I showed yesterday, that was the big hole that I water seeded. Beavers had stopped it up. I plant with a 4-wheeler and a little old cedar on the back. And that thing does a great job.
When you say water seeded, just for our audience, because, just so that they know, when you say water seeding versus another type of seeding, kind of explain what that is too.
Okay, I will. So water seeding, if you've got, heck, it could be probably as deep as you want it, but in our case, we had about a foot of water backed up in one of our big food plots, and the reason it was backed up, the beavers had stopped a little old drain pipe up. And, the first couple of years they did that, I dig the pipe out. Well, then you got to wait on the hole to dry. Well, I learned I worked in ag for 9 years, and then I learned all these different techniques and ways just by talking to local farmers. They water seed rice. And by doing that, you just broadcast that seed into the water, 2 to 3 bushels. A lot of these farmers around here, some people will soak their rice in bags or in a grain buggy. They'll put a water hose over it and they'll soak it and let it start sprouting and have it flown in by an airplane. But rather than trying to soak it like that, I just carry a few bags in on the four-wheeler, and I'll drive through that water, putting 2 to 3 bushel to the acre would be about the rate. And, the water's about a foot deep, and you just sow it, you sow the entire hole, broadcast your seed. And then in this hole, I waited 2 days, 48 hours to go in and dig the beaver dam out and drain that hole. So within that time frame, the seed has sank to the bottom. It's stuck good. And you can go out there before you drain it, and you want to grab one of those seeds, and it'll have a little bitty white, I call it a tit, just a little bitty white dot coming off of it, to where it's starting to swell and thinking about sprouting. You drain it at that point. So we've let our seed sit there for 2 days. We dig our pipe or we dig our beaver dam out. Now the water comes off of it. At that point, that seed has sank and stuck to the bottom. Well, when the water gets off, now you've got good seed to soil contact. That seed's sitting on that mud. Well, the heat and the sun and the air hits it. Well, now it sprouts and it sticks that little tit down into the mud and shoots a leaf up. Well, man, now you've got a stand of rice you can do it with a hand seeder. You can do it with a 5-gallon bucket out there by hand slinging it. You don't have to have big equipment. Literally, you see what I use. It's not high dollar stuff, but you utilize that water, which used to be a curse, and now it's a blessing, because that big hole used to take me about 8 to 10 hours to work up and to plant. Now I can do it in an hour or less just by using that water to my advantage. And, at that point, your rice comes up and you spray it and you fertilize it and try to maybe put some water back on it. But it's a method that really catches on. And honestly, during the summer, when I try to upload that video every year showing me doing that, and that is one of the most watched and probably generates more questions and follows than anything, because people are really interested in that. And again, it's something that anyone can do. We all fight beavers. We've all, most people's duck holes are either dammed up or wet. Well, now they see that and they're like, well, hey man, I can go get a hand seeder and a backpack sprayer and one of my hashtags is sweat now, shoot later. We sweat all summer long so we can shoot a few in the wintertime. And that's just that's the way I water seed it right there.
Yeah, and I think I saw another earlier in the year, and you had kind of mentioned it earlier, which I thought was pretty interesting. You just had the seeder on the four-wheeler, and you're just driving through slop, basically.
That's it. That's what I call mud. That's what I call mudding it in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's always interesting. I saw you had a bunch of comments on that, just in the sense that people didn't really think you could just drive the four-wheeler out there and spread it around, and kind of the mud just kind of slops around, and next thing you know, next video show you've got rice growing in there. It's pretty interesting.
That's right. I tell people it's not rocket science at all. And that's another reason I wait. Farmers start planting rice around here in early April, mid-April, late April. A lot of rice is planted, and then the 1st of May, I'd say 90% of the rice is planted around here. But so I'm waiting 3 more weeks or so, just so those hot temperatures. So when that seed hits the mud, it's real quick to draw moisture and sprout, because if you're throwing it in the mud like that, you got coons, you got squirrels, you got birds, and they're going to get a lot of your seed if it was to lay there very long. So that's why you really want to wait till it gets hot. And I mean, if it's for ducks, you really you don't want to run into a frost on the tail end. In other words, you don't want it to still be growing. You want it made well before it frosts.
Yeah.
But you kind of want it to mature a little bit later anyway, because we are doing it for ducks. We don't have to have it mature, the 1st of September to cut and harvest. We want it, mid-October, to be honest with you.
Stay tuned to the Ducks Unlimited podcast, sponsored by Purina Pro Plan, after these messages.
Is there any specific variety of rice that you're using, or something that you've found is a little more attractive, or anything like that?
Personally, I use a Clearfield, which is I kind of would compare it to you've got conventional soybeans, you've got Roundup Ready soybeans. Mm-hmm. So Roundup Ready, you can use glyphosate to spray and it doesn't kill the bean, where it would kill a conventional bean. Well, with rice, you've got conventional rice, but you've also got what's called Clearfield rice. So on Clearfield rice, rather than having where you would have Roundup for beans, they use a chemical called New Path. And there's other chemicals that have New Path in it. And the advantage of that for me is a lot of my holes I can't get water to. So I'm dependent on Mother Nature. I'm dependent on that little bit of shade from the trees, keeping that rice alive. So I can't spray a chemical that's going to kind of burn my rice and slow it up or ding it, because, in a crop field, a lot of times these farmers will put a hot dose of chemical on it, and then the next day they'll have water going on it. Well, the water makes that rice really grow, and it kind of grows out of that burn. Where mine, I can't get water to it. So if I burn it real bad, it would either die or it just slows it way down. So this Clearfield rice, with the chemicals that I use, has no burn on your rice at all. You can't even tell you've sprayed it as far as giving the rice an off color, but it'll kill the weeds. So that's why I went to Clearfield. It's just because, it doesn't ever slow my rice down. It does a great job of cleaning it up. And, talking about big equipment and sprayers, like we kind of went off topic a little bit there, but I've got a spray rig on my 4-wheeler. I can spray 2 acres, breakaway booms that fold out. I can spray 20 foot wide. So it's really handy to fold those booms up, strap them to the front rack, go through those 4-wheeler trails. You get to a hole of rice, kick your booms out, spray it, fold your booms back up, go down the trail a little further, get to another food plot. And so that's kind of the way I do my spraying. And then you can follow those same tracks with your cedar, and if you want to put some fertilizer on the top of your rice, which I use urea, just hit it with a shot of nitrogen. Mm-hmm. You can follow those same tracks with your little old 4-wheeler and spreader, and you're only running over one little spot. And it's something that I have learned just over the years, just trial and error. Rice suits me. It may not suit, a guy 5 miles down the road. He may need to plant millets.
Yeah.
But rice is just what fits me. And I learned that the first year that I managed it. And I said, all right, I'm going to plant as much food in all these holes that I can. I planted milo, I planted corn, I planted millet, I planted rice. And each crop was different. And rice just showed out unbelievably. And I'm like, all right, we're going wall-to-wall rice from now on. Yeah. So it's just what fits me. But, it's not for everybody.
Now, you mentioned you do a shot of fertilizer. What time of the year do you do that? How long do you wait for that rice to get up?
It's probably, I would say my rice is probably 6 inches tall. I don't know the leaf stage and stuff, that a crop consultant would, but I'd say 6-8 inches tall. You spray it for the weeds you want to kill, and then immediately upon spraying, you want to fertilize it. You want to spray it before you fertilize, for the simple fact that you don't want to hit it with fertilizer, because your weeds will take the fertilizer in too and cheats the rice, and then your weeds are competing against your rice.
Yeah.
Some people like dirty rice, in other words, they won't really spray it. They'll just throw the seed out there. It'll make, and it'll have barnyard grass, smartweed, and all these other coffee beans will come up, nut grass, and all that's good for the ducks. But a lot of times it gets so thick that it chokes your rice out, and all you're left with is the natural stuff. So I've seen people do strips. If they had like let's just say a 5-acre big plot, they'd do a tractor width of rice, skip over a tractor width, do another tractor width, and they would farm their rice and they'd leave natural in between, which made for a really, really cool setup and a really diverse deal, because you got rice, you've got natural, and then you've got rice, and it's kind of the best of both worlds when you do it that way.
Now, did you mention you've been doing this for 20 years, and a lot of what you've done and really learned probably is trial and error. You probably planted some rice that never came up. I think
yes.
I'm sure it's happened.
Absolutely.
But like, was there one person or any guidebook or anything that you kind of looked at when you were testing all these different things, when you were going from millet to maybe like a Milo, or like trying to figure out what actually worked best for you? Was there a guidebook or someone that maybe you leaned on? Anything that, yeah, go ahead.
Not so much. My uncle Harvey Shue was he was the manager for about a little over 40 years at the Coca Cola Woods. He was a very well known dog trainer and kind of just a local legend here at home, and just people just respect him and loved him, and he was like a second dad to me. And so he was the manager from let's just see here, the late 50s until 2002 when he passed. And so I was born in 78. So my entire life, I followed him around those woods and was around it. Now, he didn't do food plots like that, like I do, not anything like that. But I can remember him. He would get a 5-gallon bucket of rice and he'd go out there and find a mud hole or whatever and would throw it out there and it would come up and make some heads. So that kind of, I always remembered him doing that. And so that kind of stuck with me. When I was working in the seed and chemical business, I worked for Jimmy Sanders Incorporated for 9 years. And I can remember the federal government, some of the property that they owned, the farmers that bought from us, they farmed that property. Well, instead of collecting a rent check, the government would go out there and they would mark off, okay, you're leaving this section of crop. So basically, you left your rent in the field, if that makes any sense. Mm-hmm. And I kind of could see where this deal was going with the refuges and the sanctuaries and stuff. And as all that's kind of happening, my uncle passes and I'm hired on as the manager. And, I'm immediately thinking, all right, how can I improve? How can I improve? So I'm like, well, this is what they're doing. I see the ducks they have. It's kind of one of those deals, if you can't beat them, join them. Yeah. So I'm like, all right, we need a designated rest area. We need to leave some crops. We need to back off as far as the way we hunt and don't get in the middle of the ducks. Yeah. So it was kind of a combination of all those. And so like I said, the very first year I could remember planting corn, milo, millet, rice. The coons ate my corn as soon as it made. The deer ate my milo. The millet did okay. I knew I could always come back with millet and make something. But like I said, the rice just absolutely showed out. So yeah, it was trial and error the first year. But since those days, man, I've always tried to strive to be the best at what I do. I want to. That's just the way I'm made. From Little League, wanted to be the best little baseball player in basketball, and I've always tried to hold myself to a little bit higher standard and just be better. And I'm like, so when I took on the job as manager of the club, I'm like, all right, I want to get better every year. And throughout this deal, I've been blessed to meet some awesome people and kick ideas around and network with them. And Tony Vandermoor, he's helped me a ton, because I've called him about those rest fields and he's obviously a pro when it comes to corn and stuff. And
yeah, a little bit different habitat variants up there than what you're dealing with.
It is. But something I learned the hard way, talking about this corn and trial and error. We left an entire, and I know when you say 10 acres, it doesn't sound like much, but we left 10 acres of a solid block of corn, and typically our ducks use our willows for their rest area. They'll go to the field and roost, but they don't necessarily sit there all day. Well, the year I left a 10-acre solid little block of corn in the bottom of our 50-acre field, instead of those ducks spending their days in the willows, which is in the woods, so to speak, they stayed in the field all day, and it made it really. They just would sit there. Which again, a duck's DNA, he wants to survive to see another day. If he makes it till the end of January, he's got it licked. So they're going to adapt, and they figured out right quick they could sit in that corn and be just fine. So I learned then, I'm like, all right, I got to do something a little different. So the next year I would plant. I think I planted 16 rows, and then I would leave about 30 or 40 yards. Then I would plant 16 rows and leave 30 or 40 yards. So what that did, that they still had a little cover. They still had some food, but they didn't feel secure enough that they sat there all day long.
Yeah.
So the very next year when I did that, they went right back to using the willows, because when they're using that corner of the woods that we designate a rest area, you've got ducks buzzing around and they're flying over the woods. Well, you can steal some off of it and shoot some. Mm-hmm. But when they're flying over your field outside the woods, you don't even see them. So that was kind of a lesson I learned the hard way that year. I mean, we still had a decent year, but it was you could definitely tell that we didn't see near the birds because they were huddled up in that field.
Yeah. So obviously, when that happens, you change the plan up for sure.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, and that's these ducks are changing.
Yeah.
Everything's changing, and you either change with them or you sit there and look at a blank sky.
Yeah. Now, what do you think? You say you've been doing this for 20 years, and in the grand scheme of habitat management, 20 years is not really that long. But what have you seen that's changed over the last 20 years, and maybe just even in your area, or even maybe some of the things that people ask you about and talk to you about? What has really been one of the bigger changes in that landscape of creating and managing?
Obviously, there's a lot more hunting pressure now.
Mm-hmm.
A lot more hunters, and which, I'm not saying it's a bad thing, because we want more people in the sport. We want more kids in the sport. But there's got to be a balance as far as pressure and, like I say, rest, So, I mean, if there's a field in our area, and I don't blame a farmer at all. Any extra income he can make in the winter months is just gravy for him, So, any place that'll hold a duck in our area has pretty much got a pit in it. It's leased out, or the landowner's hunting it.
Yeah.
Whereas you back up 20 years ago, not every field was leased. So when you got that sheet water, all of a sudden now you had some extra rest areas around. That's not the case anymore. And that's why we lease a couple fields. That's why we use our fields as rest areas, just because it just holds more ducks in the area. That's definitely one of the bigger things.
Yeah.
These ducks, I mean, I read it somewhere and the guy said it great. That duck he's made to live another day. They're going to adapt. They're going to figure out how to live. And I mean, we shoot some ducks, but we hold and winter a whole bunch of ducks that never are shot at. And so, I mean, it's kind of, you got to shoot some, but you definitely doing a lot more good than bad.
Yeah. I think we talk about that a lot, where it's just, ducks are really good at surviving, surprisingly,
Absolutely.
And it seems to be everybody, it's very difficult for them from the egg all the way through their life cycle. It's very difficult, and they are very good at surviving.
Yes, they are. Thank goodness.
Yeah, absolutely.
Our ducks have at times will get, I don't really want to call it nocturnal, but let's just say they'll get up from the rest areas or from other people's fields that they go roost in, and they're going to come in, the bulk of them, before shooting hours. Mm-hmm. And a lot of evenings they're not going to leave until after shooting hours. So I mean, they figured it out. If we fly when it's dark, we can survive. And so there's definitely some of that going on. That's just two factors, that come to mind first, as far as kind of things that have changed in the last few, let's just say 20 years. But it's still, it's still awesome 20 years later, to see the rice come up after I plant, to see it make its first head, to get water on it, and to see those first mallards get here and be in the food plot and see that come full circle. 20 years of doing it, I still feel like I did 20 years ago when it happens.
Yeah, I've seen some of those videos you shoot of just incredible numbers of mallards pouring into a hole. And it's always, pretty early And it's just amazing seeing some of them. It's just quite a show. I recommend everybody, if you get a chance, check out, Rusty's Instagram account. What's your handle again? I didn't have it written down.
It's just Rusty Creasy. And then,
That's easy.
it's pretty easy. Yeah. Kind of the way I hate to say it, but the way the woods got known and my name kind of got out there, Mr. Freddie King and Rick Dunn, we were doing the old Echo DVDs.
Mm-hmm.
And then we shot some YouTube stuff and it really spread like wildfire. Obviously when YouTube started growing and everybody saw it, yeah, man, the volume of ducks, as you've heard me say, the show never gets old. The show never disappoints. And after you see a show like that at daylight, and they literally, you can feel the wind off their wings, they're splashing water on you. At times you can touch them. After you see that, the limit really doesn't matter. The limit, I tell people, is just a number. A lot of times I may have 12, the boss enjoys big groups of guys. We may have 13 or 14 guys in a hole. Well, there's definitely days we can go shoot 14, 15 limits of ducks. Let's just say 60 mallards. But what I like to do, all right, let's watch a show, let the bulk of those ducks sit down in the woods to where, once those ducks sit down in the woods, they sit there all day and they don't leave till dark.
Yeah.
Those same ducks are coming back tomorrow. So if you shoot while all that big beehive over the woods is going on, if you shoot a couple times, you're fixed to run a whole bunch of ducks off. And then you're going to be looking at a blank sky.
Yeah.
So we watch it. We love to watch an epic show. Instead of shooting 16 limits, all right, hey, let's just shoot us 10 limits. 2 or 3 ducks a man, shoot you 40 ducks, watch an epic show.
That's a lot of
get
ducks.
Out of the wood. Absolutely. I had a guy last year said, hey, if you can just break double digits on a hunt, it's a good hunt.
Oh, yeah.
I'm like a little better now. I'm like, well, I want to shoot 20 anyway. But all right, let's just say we shoot 40 ducks, watch an epic show. We're out of the woods by 9 o'clock, eating breakfast at 9:30, 9:45. There ain't a dang thing wrong with that morning, in my opinion.
No.
So I'll take 40 days of that any day of the week. But talking about pressure and stuff and the ways that we like to hold ducks, that's probably one of my keys is don't shoot when the sky's full.
Yeah.
Let those ducks sit down. And we do what the boss calls a cocktail cruise every evening. And dude, it's so much fun because you've got people who live in the city who may have never seen the sunset over the woods or over the rice fields in the Delta. So you go, you take your adult beverage. A lot of times we'll have a fire right there at dark. All those ducks start getting up out of the woods. A lot of them coming right over you, but you can, as far as you can see, they're leaving the woods. They're going out to roost. The sun's setting. It is an epic show, and it kind of sets the tone for the next day. But it also helps me from a scouting standpoint because I want to see the ducks and I want to be in the ducks, but I don't want to be in the middle of them, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
So if you can bounce around and hunt the edges of your ducks, if the ducks are mainly using the south end, all right, well, we're going to get just west of them and a little bit north and not get in that concentration of ducks and let them rest, if you can do that day to day, well, now all of a sudden you've held your ducks. All right, you made it through the first split.
Yeah,
and it's like you get by till that next split, until that next little break. All right, well, we held them till now. All right, we're going to try to hold them till Christmas. All right, we held them till Christmas. All right, well, we got to hold them. Blah blah blah. So
now how does
the
local rivers impact you guys as far as when the White and the Cache and all of these rivers in Arkansas get out? I immediately hear everyone like, oh, we lost all of our ducks, because those ducks, they bounce.
You definitely, absolutely. You definitely lose some for a little while because here's what you got. Like you were talking about the fresh food, fresh water. All right. Well, man, a dry year for us is absolutely incredible because we've always got water. We've always got food. No matter if it rains or not, we're going to be flooded come opening day. So those ducks, they get pounded. And so every place that's got water is basically hunted in our area and all around. So the minute that they get some fresh food, some fresh water, well, man, I've had my butt shot off the last week. We're going somewhere else. Yeah. Now, they take some 2 or 3 days and a lot of them venture back. The White, River it's a big draw. When it gets out, that's a lot of water and a lot of spots that honestly some people can't even hunt or get to.
Yeah.
So that does affect us some, but I don't think it affects us as bad as it used to. Now that we hold our concentration of ducks in the area. We're blessed to have really good neighbors north of us and southeast of us who manage and have rest fields and rest areas.
Mm-hmm.
So it's almost like we share this little concentration of, I don't know, 70, 80, 100,000 ducks, whatever it is. We all share those ducks.
Yeah.
And as long as nobody kind of breaks away and, all right, we're going to hunt from daylight till dark, or we're going to hunt in the evenings, or I'm going to go shoot my rest field. As long as nobody does nothing out of the ordinary, we pretty much hold our own little old nest egg of ducks.
Yeah. No, that's convenient.
But yeah, you can definitely tell on a big rain or whatever when those ducks get a chance to go to fresh food and fresh water. You definitely lose them a couple days.
Yeah, I was just curious. I've got a couple more questions. We'll let you get out of here. So, we deal with a lot of, young hunters, young waterfowlers who, they're like, man, I want to be a duck guide when I grow up. I'm going to be a, property manager. What would you say to, a young person who is interested in kind of doing the same thing that you do? How would you even start that conversation with someone like that?
That is one of the probably most popular questions that I get on social media.
I bet. Yeah.
And my situation is really unique just because my grandmother used to pick ducks at the old Coca Cola woods. My uncle was a manager / caretaker / cook. I joke around and say you got to wear lots of hats.
Mm-hmm.
But so my situation, yes, I could have messed it up and I could have chosen to done something different, but I feel like my situation is really unique. In other words, it was almost like it was there.
Yeah.
I just had to take it and run with it. But what I try to tell people, the key to somehow ending up in a position like that is network. And I had a gentleman tell me that years ago, don't burn any bridges, get to know as many people in this industry as there is in the waterfowl world, in the management world, and, make a great first impression. Don't be afraid of any job as far as, you're not too good to do this or do that or whatever, but get to know as many people as you can and build up a good name. And, if something comes around and it fits your area and fits, what you're wanting to do, you'll hear about it through the grapevine. But it is a tough gig. Now, I would say this, the guiding deal, I'd say that's it's definitely an easier role to get in.
Yeah.
If you can, practice your duck calling, practice your goose calling, whatever it is you want to do, get really good at it. And then you've networked, all of a sudden, you've messaged Tony and you've told him, well, all of a sudden he's got a guy that leaves or goes and does something else. He reaches out to you. Well, man, now's your chance.
Yep.
So you've really got to prepare for when the time comes. You got to be ready for it. And just hustle, man. Just hustle and treat people good. That's something I try to stress is, don't be that guy.
Yeah.
Don't be that guy. Just do what's right and work hard. And it's amazing how stuff just kind of always works out. It may take it a minute. It may not be on your time and it'll be God's timing, but it will work out if you do what's right and just work hard. My brother, and he's been huge and kind of, for one, getting me into getting me eat up with hunting in the outdoors. He took me from the time I could walk. My uncle and he helps me. One of my best friends helped me through the season, but I assure them that, there's nothing that I'll ever ask them to do that I won't do myself or that I haven't already done.
Yep.
I always looked at Tony before I got to know him. I thought, well, hey, Tony, he shows up, he they got everything set up. He's the face. He shows up, shoots, leaves. All right, you guys pick that up.
He wishes.
Boy, was I wrong.
Yeah.
You know, and that, like I said, that was way before I got to know him. Once I got to know him, I can look at his hands and tell those are a working man's hands. You know, and I went goose hunting with him, and he's out there working his tail off with his guides and with his helpers, and he's putting out decoys. He's doing everything. You know, there's no job that he's too good to do, and so I think that's something people got to keep in mind. You know, I pick up trash, I tote firewood, I cook. I mean, a toilet stopped up. I wear lots of hats.
Yep.
Now, if a toilet stops up these days, I'll probably call a guy. But I have
you got a guy's number now.
But I have done it all, and don't be afraid to start at the bottom and work your way up. It's doable. You got to know the right people, catch the right break, and that's just network is huge.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, I think that just from my experience networking and 90% of guiding and being around that many people is just kind of being a nice person. That's
hey, yeah. Don't be that guy.
Yeah.
Don't be that guy who's on social media. But if you can't learn at a young age, mom and dad, if you can't say something nice, don't say nothing at all. And when you shake a man's hand, you look him in the eye and you grab a hold of him. You don't shake hands like some little sissy or like some little girl. It's amazing what a handshake will do as far as the first impression when you shake someone's hand and look them in the eye. But now I'm old school. The world we live in today, it may not be as popular, but I'd say that more times than not, you'll stand out from everybody else with good manners and a good handshake. That's
right. Now, my last question, this is one that popped up in my head as we're doing it, and then we'll get you out of here. So what's that snake situation like in that wet, half muddy timber you got going on over there? Because that's what I was thinking about when I was watching that video. I was like, man, there is a cottonmouth around every corner.
They are thick. I watch again, man. I've been there in those woods my whole life. So every step I'm watching, I'm looking, but where I kind of worry about them more so than anything is tearing out beaver dams and stuff when you're kind of down in the muck and whatnot, or in the end of a pipe. That's prime location for a cottonmouth. But yeah, we have got our fair of them. But I'll say this: we don't have as many as we used to.
Yeah, I bet.
But yeah, man, it's they're thick. I wear snake boots, and honestly, I worry more about them in like October than I do now, just because at that point they've gone in the ground and they come back out and I think they're blind and they just kind of strike at heat and they're mad at the world at that point. So you definitely got to be careful in those months, brushing blind and stuff like that. But yeah, you just got to be on your toes and be aware of your surroundings. Kind of like when you come over there to Memphis, you got to pay attention to what's going on over there. Look over your shoulder.
That's right. Well, that's cool. Well, Rusty, this has been great. We're going to have to get you back on here. Maybe sometime in the fall we'll get you on, just kind of talk about how your water's looking and how, maybe a preseason outlook for that area. I mean, you probably, not only your property, you probably have a pretty good judge of what the area surrounding you looks like. So we'll definitely have to bring you back on.
We do bounce ideas and bounce, scouting reports, and everybody kind of stays in contact and works together. So, it's a great little area. But, man, thank you so much for the opportunity to be on. It's a pleasure and a treat. I never would have thought some old redneck from Morton, Arkansas would get to do it, but I am thankful. And if y'all listen this long, I sure do appreciate it.
Awesome. I'm sure they did. Man, thanks a lot.
Thank you. Keep in touch. Hope to talk to you this fall.
All right, will do. I'd like to thank my guest, Rusty Creasy, the manager at the Coca Cola Club, for coming on and talking to us about how he handles some of the off-season habitat stuff and just his day in the life of being the manager of the Coca Cola Club. I'd like to thank our producer, Chris Isaac, for putting the show together and getting it out to you. And I'd like to thank you, the audience, for listening to the Ducks Unlimited podcast and supporting wetlands conservation.
Thank you for listening to the DU Podcast, sponsored by Purina Pro Plan, the official performance dog food of Ducks Unlimited. Purina Pro Plan, always advancing. Be sure to rate, review, and subscribe to the show, and visit ducks.org/DU Podcast. Opinions expressed by guests do not necessarily reflect those of Ducks Unlimited. Until next time, Stay tuned to the ducks.